As a general rule, employers are in a much more powerful position than employees in a labour market. Now, we have talked before about how product markets are the most important consideration when it comes to pay setting and in determining the way that an employment relationship works. But clearly, labour markets play an important role as well. And one of the reasons why we understand that in employment relations terms, employers are usually in a much stronger position than employees is because of this disparity between the two in terms of their labour market power. So understanding how those labour market dynamics works is an important part of seeing how the relationships between employers and employees pans out, and how different labour market conditions can give rise to different types of patterns of employment relationships, and also different conditions in which rewards might be more or less attractive to employees, and therefore setting the boundaries of what employers need to consider in determining their reward design approach. Now, I mentioned that employers tend to be in a stronger position. Why is that? Well, by and large, it's about the numbers of buyers and sellers that we might come across at any one time in a marketplace. Now, we know that market situations are determined by the different behaviours of buyers and sellers. Buyers have got something that they want to buy, and sellers have got something that they want to sell. In labour market terms, employers are buyers of labour. Employees, potential employees, are sellers of labour. That is their commodity. That's the thing that they've got available to sell. Now, given that in any given situation there are always going to be fewer buyers, fewer employers than there are employees, because employees are numbered in their millions, their tens of millions, their hundreds of millions globally, and the buyers of labour are in much smaller amounts because they're firms, often very big firms, then the behaviour of the buyers and sellers of labour has a different impact. If one buyer, one big buyer of labour, one big employer decides to behave differently or feels that they can behave differently, that can alter the dynamics of the whole market or of a whole segment of the labour market. The behaviour of one employee, of one seller of labour, has a much smaller amount because they can always be replaced by somebody else. There are millions of them. Employers can always go and find somebody else to do the thing that maybe this one seller of labour has decided that they're not willing to do. So the dynamics underneath all of the differences that we see from time to time in different labour market situations that we will talk about, but underneath all of that is this disparity of power that employers, because of their size, their influence on the market, and obviously their wealth and just their general power in society, that employers tend to be in a more favourable situation. They can shift the market onto a terrain which is more advantageous to them, much more easily than employees can do. And it's only in certain situations that employees are able to approach those types or those level of power. Now, this issue about how the dynamics of the labour market plays out, sometimes it can take on quite extreme forms. So sometimes we see what economists might call a monopsony situation, a situation where there is effectively only one buyer of labour. So it may be that in a locality, in a particular local labour market, there's a dominant employer. We don't see this much now in developed economies because of increased ability to travel, increased mobility within the labour market. People have the facility to travel further afield. But if we imagine a few generations ago, you would often see whole communities that were dominated by a single buyer of labour, and they could really then effectively set the market. This is a one company town, and the company determines what the market for labour is going to look like. So where there is a dominant employer in a labour market, monopsony, very extreme forms of labour market dynamics can appear. Monopoly labour markets, where there is only one seller, is obviously much more difficult to achieve, because on the seller side, like I said, the labour market is much more diverse. There is a much greater diversity of potential sellers. And also buyers of labour are also mobile. And if a labour market looks like it's getting too rigid from their point of view because the sellers of labour are too strong, they can always move to somewhere where there is more flexibility, more options for them to exercise control, where the sellers of labour maybe don't have such a powerful situation. So monopoly labour market situations are much more rare. Again, a reflection of this general underlying disparity of power between employers and employees in labour markets. Now, we see these different dynamics, the relative strength of buyers or sellers in labour markets gives rise to general advantage, general additional power to have the market play out in a way which is more advantageous to one side or another. So the buyers and sellers of labour, the employers and employees, will try and engineer to encourage the market situation to play more to their side than another. Now, like I say, employers have all kinds of inbuilt advantages to make that so. Employees have historically, and talking about going back over a long period of time, attempted to shift the market dynamics to favour them in various regards. So we can see this going right back to old medieval guilds, the restriction of access to do certain types of work unless you're a member of a certain organisation. That restriction of labour. You can only buy labour from a certain group of people. That's about closing down the market, about increasing the advantage on the seller's side, so that it's a bit more difficult for the buyers of labour, for employers to be able to do whatever they would like to do. And we see this continue in more modern times through the development of trade unions, through the development of closed shop arrangements in organisations, so that you have to be a member of a union in order to gain access to employment in an organisation. A lot of these things we can't do anymore, but they all stem from that same desire to shift the market dynamics in favour of either the buyer or the seller of labour. Now, because of the nature of how political discourse has changed during neoliberal times, we see that these attempts to shift the market as a largely bad thing. But there have been times, and we'll talk about it on another occasion, where attempts to alter these market dynamics for policy reasons has become a matter of political concern. Not to stop it happening, but to encourage it. And there are some good reasons for that to take place, which we'll look at later. So, the market dynamics generally in favour of employer, not so much in favour of employees because of their inbuilt advantage and disadvantage, but not usually lying at either end of the continuum between monopsony situations or monopoly situations, somewhere in between. And it differs depending upon the nature of the employer, on the nature of the employee, the nature of the work, the nature of the jobs, the nature of the skills that are being bought or sold. That in some locations, for some jobs, in some industries, in certain economic situations, that some things are more rare, some things are more common. Where they're more rare, they tend to be more valuable. Where they're more common, they tend to be less valuable because there's a greater supply of them. And buyers of labour have always got more choices to be able to find someone who's willing to take the job for a little bit less. But where the market is tighter, where the skills are more rare, more valuable, they can push the price up. They can demand better rewards. Buyers have to work harder than they otherwise would. And so in these situations, we see the market advantage, the power within labour markets swinging between seller and buyers. That employees in certain situations might enjoy certain advantages. In other situations, the advantage is much more firmly on the employer's side. So we need to be aware of not just how an organisation is doing in terms of product market, but also to understand how the dynamics of particular labour markets play out. That in some localities, among certain skills, the labour market dynamics are different. So we need to look at what is going on in those markets. We need to understand just how valuable, how rare a particular group of skills or a particular group of potential employees might be. We need to be aware of broader changes around markets, about how things like outsourcing and offshoring might change the dynamics fundamentally, about how certain skills and certain abilities simply become redundant through the advance of technology, that certain things can just be digitized, to be automated, and they just disappear as a market advantage. And in those situations, the advantage swings entirely to the buyer of labour, because the skills that sellers might have had previously simply no longer figure. They're no longer a source of value in the labour market. And these are the dynamics that we need to understand when we look at any situation where an organisation is thinking, how much do I need to pay? How generous do I need to be in terms of my rewards? How am I going to attract the people that I need to my organisation? It's this awareness of the labour market, of its dynamics, and in the rarity of the labour that I'm trying to recruit.